Ladies and gentlemen, the feeling of being behind in life is one of the most common private pains on earth, and it's also one of the most misunderstood. Because when someone says, "I feel behind," what they're really saying is, "I feel like my life is not matching the timeline I was promised." And the mind doesn't experience that as a simple thought. It experiences it as threat. A threat to identity, a threat to worth, a threat to belonging, a threat to safety. That's why it doesn't just make you sad. It makes you anxious, restless, ashamed, and sometimes numb, because your nervous system believes something is wrong with you, not just wrong with your schedule. The feeling of being behind in life is rarely about your actual progress. It's usually about what your mind is comparing your progress to. It's comparison, not reality. And the most dangerous part is that comparison doesn't stay in your head as a simple thought. It becomes a full body experience. Your chest tightens, your stomach drops, your mind races. You feel shame, urgency, panic, and you start acting from pressure instead of purpose. That's because the brain treats social ranking like survival. Deep down, being behind sounds like being left out, and being left out sounds like danger. So your nervous system reacts as if you are in trouble, even when your life is simply taking a different path. Modern comparison is not normal comparison. In the past, you compared yourself to a small circle, neighbors, classmates, relatives, people you actually knew. You saw their full life. You saw their struggles, their awkward moments, their failures, their boring days. That kind of comparison was still painful sometimes, but it was more balanced. Today, you compare yourself to a global feed of highlights. You see the best angles, the biggest wins, the perfect captions, the announcement moments, the promotion post, the marriage photos, the travel shots, the new car, the new body, the new business. You don't see the anxiety behind it. You don't see the debt. You don't see the family problems. You don't see the loneliness. You don't see the stress, the insomnia, the messy relationships, the mental health struggles, the private breakdowns. So your mind is comparing your unfiltered life to someone else's edited story, and then punishing you for not matching a story that was never complete. This is why behind is so common even among people who are doing well. Someone can have a job, a family, a home, and still feel behind because there is always someone who seems to have more, be faster, be better, be happier. Comparison creates a moving target. The finish line keeps shifting, and when the finish line keeps shifting, peace becomes impossible. You don't feel proud of what you built because your attention is stuck on what you don't have. That doesn't mean you are ungrateful. It means your brain is being trained to focus on gaps, not progress. Another reason this keynote matters is that comparison does not just measure outcomes, it attacks identity. The mind doesn't say, "I want more skills." The mind says, "I'm not enough." The mind doesn't say, "They are ahead in one area." The mind says, "They are ahead in life." And that is a lie. People can be ahead financially and behind emotionally, ahead socially and behind mentally, ahead in career and behind in health, ahead in status and behind in peace. But the comparing brain doesn't see complexity. It sees a scoreboard. It turns a human life into a ranking system, and rankings create shame. Shame is the real poison here. Shame doesn't motivate you, it paralyzes you. When you feel ashamed, you don't take clean action, you take desperate action, or you take no action. You may start copying other people's paths without understanding your own needs. You may rush into relationships, rush into business ideas, rush into risky decisions because you want to close the gap quickly. Or you may freeze, because every step feels like proof that you're still behind. That's how comparison steals time. It doesn't just make you feel bad, it changes your behavior in ways that keep you stuck. Comparison also distorts memory. When you feel behind, your brain becomes a collector of evidence for your failure story. It starts scanning your past for proof that you wasted time. It highlights regrets. It replays mistakes. It ignores growth. It ignores the times you survived. It ignores the skills you built. It ignores the progress you made. This is a cognitive bias. The mind becomes selective, and it selects pain. So even if you improved, you can't feel it because your attention is trained to look for what's missing. The cure is not pretending you don't compare. The cure is learning to compare correctly. Compare yourself to your past self, not to someone's highlight reel. Compare your discipline today to your discipline last year. Compare your emotional control today to your emotional control before. Compare your knowledge, your habits, your confidence, your boundaries. That kind of comparison builds hope because it shows proof of movement. And proof of movement is what builds belief. You also need to remember that most head lives are expensive. They cost something you may not be willing to pay: stress, time, sleep, health, relationships, peace. You're not behind. You're choosing different costs. And sometimes your delay is not delay at all. It's preparation. Healing takes time. Learning takes time. Recovering from trauma takes time. Fixing your mindset takes time. Building real confidence takes time. If you compare your timeline to someone who didn't have your obstacles, you will always feel behind because you are playing different games. So yes, people feel behind, but the feeling is often not a fact. It's a comparison habit. It's attention pointed at someone else's pace instead of your own direction. And the moment you redirect attention from "where are they?" to "what am I building today?" the nervous system calms, shame loosens, and progress becomes possible again. The universal timeline is one of the most dangerous stories the modern mind believes, because it turns normal life variation into personal shame. It teaches people that success has a schedule, and if you don't hit the milestones on time, something is wrong with you. By a certain age, you should have a degree, a job, a salary, a relationship, a marriage, a house, a body, a status, a purpose. And when your life doesn't match that script, your mind doesn't interpret it as different. It interprets it as defective. That's why feeling behind is so painful. It's not just a gap in progress, it becomes a verdict on identity. This timeline is not a law of nature, it's a cultural script. It changes across countries, families, and generations. In one culture, marriage early is expected. In another, career first is expected. In one family, education is everything. In another, business is everything. In one environment, people leave home at 18. In another, people stay with family longer and it's normal. So if the timeline can change based on geography and tradition, it is not truth, it's a story. But most people never question it. They absorb it from parents, movies, school systems, social media, and friends. Then they use it like a ruler to measure their worth, and that ruler was never designed to measure a human life. The timeline becomes toxic because it ignores reality. It ignores setbacks. It ignores mental health. It ignores economic conditions. It ignores family responsibilities. It ignores trauma. It ignores illness. It ignores migration. It ignores the fact that some people start later because they had to survive first. You can't demand the same pace from someone who grew up safe and supported and someone who grew up under stress, chaos, or scarcity. Yet the universal timeline doesn't care. It judges everyone with the same standard. And when you internalize that judgment, you start attacking yourself for things that were never under your control. This creates a specific emotional cocktail: shame plus urgency. Shame says, "I'm falling behind." Urgency says, "I must catch up fast." That combination makes people desperate. They rush into careers they hate just to look stable. They rush into relationships just to not be alone. They rush into marriages just to meet a deadline. They buy things they can't afford just to look successful. They pretend they're happy just to stop people from asking questions. And the worst part is that these rushed choices often create bigger problems later, because they were not aligned choices, they were fear choices. Fear choices don't build a life, they build a mask. The universal timeline also steals your ability to appreciate your own growth. Even when you improve, you can't enjoy it, because you're measuring yourself against a fake schedule instead of your real progress. You might finally become emotionally stable, but you think it doesn't matter because you're still not married. You might finally leave a toxic relationship, but you think it doesn't matter because you're starting over. You might finally develop discipline, but you think it doesn't matter because you're late. This is how the timeline turns victories into disappointments. It trains you to ignore what you have gained and obsess over what you have not yet achieved, and it creates social pressure that feels humiliating. People ask questions: when will you settle? When will you start earning more? When will you buy a house? What are you doing with your life? Even if they don't mean harm, the questions activate the timeline. They trigger the fear of being judged. They trigger the fear of being seen as less. And when you feel judged, you may either explain, defend yourself, or hide. None of those responses are freedom. Freedom is when your self-worth is not dependent on meeting someone else's deadlines. The healthier way to live is to replace the timeline with direction. A timeline is about speed. Direction is about alignment. A timeline says, "Where should I be by now?" Direction says, "Where am I going, and what step am I taking today?" This shift is powerful because it brings control back. You can't control how fast life gives you results, but you can control your habits, your learning, your consistency, your standards, your boundaries. Direction measures you by your actions, not by your age. Direction honors the reality that some seasons are for building, some are for healing, some are for learning, some are for restarting. When you stop obeying the universal timeline, you stop treating your life like a race. You stop believing that late means over. You start realizing that many people who look on time are actually misaligned. They hit milestones but feel empty because they followed the script without asking what they truly value. And many people who look behind are actually in a powerful rebuilding phase. They are healing, gaining clarity, building skills, and preparing to grow faster later because their foundation is real. So the core of this keynote is simple. The universal timeline is a mental trap that turns normal delay into shame, and shame into desperate decisions. Your life is not late, your life is yours. Measure progress by alignment, not by deadlines you never signed up for. Perfectionism and fear are two of the most common hidden engines behind the feeling of being behind in life. Because they don't just slow you down, they convince you that slowing down is being smart. They disguise avoidance as preparation. They make you feel productive while you are actually stuck. And by the time you realize it, months or years have passed. Then the mind screams, "I'm behind," when the real problem was never ability, it was the emotional cost of starting imperfectly. Perfectionism is not simply having high standards. High standards are flexible. They push you to improve while still allowing progress. Perfectionism is rigid. It says, if I can't do it perfectly, I won't do it at all. It says, if I start small, I'll look stupid. It says, if I fail, it means I am a failure. It turns learning into humiliation. It turns practice into embarrassment. It turns feedback into danger. And once your brain links imperfection with shame, you begin to delay anything that might expose you. That's why perfectionists often become experts at planning. They research. They watch videos, they take notes, they build strategies, they organize systems, they rewrite goals, they make lists, they wait for the right moment. It looks like effort, but it's often fear management. The mind is trying to avoid the emotional risk of action, because action creates outcomes, and outcomes can include failure, criticism, rejection, or disappointment. Planning feels safe because nothing can go wrong on paper. But life is not built on paper. Life is built through repetitions in reality. Fear plays a major role because fear is not always loud. Sometimes fear is quiet, intelligent, and convincing. It says, not today. It says, you need to prepare more. It says, you should wait until you're confident. It says, what if you fail and waste time? But the cruel irony is that fear wastes more time than failure ever could. Failure teaches. Failure gives data. Failure corrects your direction. Waiting teaches nothing. Waiting only strengthens the belief that you cannot handle discomfort. So the longer you wait, the scarier starting becomes. The task grows in your mind. The stakes increase. And now you're not just starting a project, you're starting with the weight of all the time you delayed, which makes fear even stronger. This is how the behind feeling forms. It starts with a delay, then the mind notices time passing, then shame appears, then urgency appears. Now you feel pressure. Pressure makes you want perfection even more, because you think perfection will save you from regret. But pressure and perfectionism together create paralysis. You become terrified to choose a path because choosing one path means not choosing another. You become terrified to commit because committing means risking being wrong. So you keep yourself in the safest place, the place where you can still imagine many futures without having to live one. That is the fantasy trap. In fantasy, you can be anything. In reality, you must be a beginner first. And perfectionism hates the beginner stage. Perfectionism also distorts how you see other people. It makes you think everyone else is confident before they start, when in truth, most people start while scared. It makes you believe others are naturally talented, when in truth they practiced more. It makes you assume others had clarity, when many had confusion but moved anyway. Perfectionism filters out the messy part of growth. It only notices the outcome. So you look at the polished result and forget the years of imperfect reps behind it. Then you judge yourself for not being at the finish line when you haven't started running. A powerful psychological shift is to replace perfect with evidence. Confidence does not come from thinking, it comes from proof. Proof comes from action. Action comes from accepting imperfection. You don't need motivation first. You don't need confidence first. You need a small action that creates evidence that you can do it. Evidence can be tiny: one page written, one workout done, one application sent, one conversation started, one skill practiced for 15 minutes. Those small actions look unimpressive, but they are the foundation of identity change. They tell your brain, I am the kind of person who moves. And once you start moving, the behind feeling begins to weaken, because the mind is no longer staring at time, it is watching progress. The deepest truth is that perfectionism is often self-protection. It tries to protect you from shame by keeping you from situations where shame could happen. But the cost of that protection is your life. The cost is time. The cost is opportunity. The cost is momentum. And the only way out is to choose a new rule. I would rather be imperfect and progressing than perfect and stuck. When you accept that, you stop waiting for the right moment, and you start creating it, one imperfect step at a time. Ownership is the antidote to feeling behind, because ownership shifts your mind from helpless comparison to active direction. When people feel behind, they often try to solve it by rushing, by forcing big moves, by chasing quick wins, by copying other people's timelines. But rushing is not the same as progress. Rushing is anxiety pretending to be productivity. Real progress comes from structure, and structure is built through systems, not sudden motivation. A system is what you do when you don't feel like doing anything. A system is a small, repeatable action that keeps you moving even on low energy days. That's why systems are so powerful. They remove emotion from the driver's seat and put commitment in control. Feeling behind usually comes with a sense of chaos. Your mind is scattered, your emotions are heavy, you feel pressure from all directions. I need to fix everything. I need to catch up. I need to become someone else quickly. That mental chaos makes people either freeze or sprint. Freezing looks like procrastination. Sprinting looks like overworking, burnout, and desperate decisions. Ownership calms both extremes because it narrows your focus. It says, I can't do everything today, but I can do one thing today. And that one thing, repeated daily, becomes momentum. Momentum is what closes gaps, not motivation. Systems matter because motivation is unreliable. Motivation depends on mood, sleep, confidence, and external encouragement. It rises and falls. If your plan depends on motivation, you will only perform when you feel good, and life does not always feel good. A system doesn't ask how you feel, it asks what you do. It creates a non-negotiable minimum. This could be 15 minutes of focused work, one workout set, one page of reading, one application sent, one skill practice session, one healthy meal, 1 hour of editing, one journal entry, one prayer routine, one outreach message. The action can be small, but the repetition is what matters. Repetition builds identity. Identity builds consistency. Consistency creates results. Ownership also changes your relationship with time. When you feel behind, time feels like an enemy. Every day feels like proof that you're losing. But when you have a system, time becomes your partner. Each day becomes a container for action. You stop thinking, I need to catch up. And you start thinking, I need to show up. Showing up daily is what creates compound growth, and compound growth is invisible in the beginning, but unstoppable later. People who feel behind often underestimate the power of compounding because they're desperate for instant change. Systems teach patience because they produce results gradually, but reliably. A system also protects you from perfectionism. Perfectionism says, do it all, do it perfectly, or don't do it. A system says, do the minimum, do it consistently. This removes the pressure that keeps people stuck. It replaces grand promises with small proofs. It replaces emotional drama with practical behavior. And once you collect small proofs, your confidence starts to rise, not because you told yourself nice words, but because you have evidence. Evidence is the only confidence that lasts. Ownership includes responsibility for environment too. Many people fail systems because their environment fights them. A strong system is supported by small changes, remove distractions, schedule a fixed time, prepare tools in advance, reduce friction, make the behavior easier to start. If you want to read, keep the book visible. If you want to train, keep workout clothes ready. If you want to create content, organize your files. These small environmental decisions reduce decision fatigue. They make discipline cheaper. When discipline becomes cheaper, consistency becomes more natural. Another part of ownership is choosing one direction at a time. People feel behind and try to fix everything at once. Health, money, relationships, career, skills, mindset, appearance. That creates overwhelm, and overwhelm creates collapse. Systems work best when you pick one priority and commit to it long enough to see progress. You can still care about everything, but you can't chase everything. Ownership is choosing what matters most right now, then building a routine around it. And then there is the emotional side. When you feel behind, your inner voice becomes cruel. It attacks. It calls you lazy, late, stupid, useless. That voice does not help you move. It makes you afraid to move. Ownership is not just work harder. It is speak differently. It is treating yourself like someone you are responsible for helping. Firm, honest, disciplined, but not abusive. Systems thrive in a stable mind, not in a mind at war with itself. The reason systems close the gap is because they create predictable output. Predictable output produces predictable improvement. Predictable improvement produces momentum. Momentum produces opportunities, and opportunities change your timeline, not through magic, but through consistency. When you own your actions daily, the feeling of being behind starts to fade, because you are no longer staring at what you missed. You are building what you want, one small action at a time, until the gap becomes a memory instead of a fear.